It's also just important to remember, as someone just mentioned, I think, Gail, that this is the first of 3 events. So we are going to do a second one in 2 weeks, which will be talking about self-advocacy, accommodations, and some after-school care for when we, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to get rid of this dog. She's usually very quiet. Some after-school care for those first days back when everyone's a little overwhelmed. And then we are going to be having a third event in September. We haven't picked the date yet, but that one's going to be all about IEPs and IPRCs. So we're hoping the timing around that one comes at about the time that everyone is starting to manage those documents at their schools. So we will keep you posted on when that timing is happening. Okay, so that's sort of the that's some of the housekeeping.
Can I have a throw in a quick question? Because it's being recorded, that means that I'll be able to save the recording just to watch it again, even though I'm watching it now?
Yes, you will. It'll be on our, it will also be on our, YouTube channel so that you will be able to see it anytime.
Super. Just to let you know quickly, I'm high functioning autistic.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you. Sorry for interrupting.
That's okay. I hope you enjoy the presentation. And at this point, I'm going to ask everyone to mute. And
Okay.
When we're prepared for questions, we'll let you know. Thank you so much. Okay, so let me introduce our amazing panel tonight. You can see hopefully Cara and Bruce. Cara Dymond is a great friend of Autism Canada. She's also an autism consultant with a large school board in Ontario. She teaches kids on the spectrum, and she's also a teacher instructor at OISE, which is where teachers go to learn to be teachers, I think, right? Cara, is that a good explanation?
That's right, yeah.
Cara is also the author of an amazing book called The Autism Lens, and it's a resource for teachers to help them connect with and support kids on the spectrum. And I always tell people that it's also an amazing resource for parents. It's a fantastic book. I have read the whole thing. Cara, I don't know if you have a copy, but if you want to hold it up and show it, I forgot mine, but it is a great book. And I suggest everyone takes a look for that. We'll send a link for it after this. And then we also have with us Bruce Petherick, another fantastic friend of ours who is an autism advocate. He's a neurodiverse musician, and he's also a high school teacher. So, and Bruce is also a parent. So he gets this whole back to school thing, the whole circle of it. So Bruce is fantastic, and we're so grateful that you guys are here with us. And excuse me for 1 second, and we'll be right back. I apologize. Get over here.
Dum da dum 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 dum.
I'm sorry.
Dum dum da
Sorry
da
about that.
da.
If I let her go out, she'll bark, and if I leave her in, she'll bark. Anyway, so let's get started. Did you guys have anything to add to the introduction at all, Cara, Bruce?
No, that was lovely. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we're excited tonight because we're going to be talking about back to school, which is obviously an issue that's front of mind for everyone right now. There's a lot of talk about it in the news. There's a lot of talk about it on social media. And there's going to be a lot of changes for kids going back after being online last year. So tonight we want to cover a few topics. So we're going to try and get through quite a few things over the next hour. I can't even. We're going to try and get through quite a few things over the next hour.
So we will take questions. Ideally, we'll take them through the chat, and perhaps at the end of the session, we'll open it up to questions if people want to unmute and ask a question if we have time. So why don't we kick off with talking about a little bit about the effects of COVID on kids and why it's going to be different returning to in-person school, and maybe some of the takeaways from last year and what we feel as teachers and educators and parents, what we feel our kids are feeling right now about going back and how they're feeling about the transition. Do you want to kick that off, Cara?
Sure. So, I mean, every individual is different. You will have students who are very excited to go back to school, who have missed their peers, who have missed their teachers. You will also have students who are apprehensive about going back, who are afraid because of the climate that we're in, because of I had a student last year whose class had to isolate 4 or 5 times. And he was so happy when we moved to online because he just did not feel safe. And I think that's an important thing that we always have to be aware of, that being safe and feeling safe are 2 different things. And we want students to both be safe and feel safe. So part of the preparation is reminding them about what to expect at school, how certain things still look different. We're not going back to school the way it was in January 2020, for instance. So it's a bit of a mental shift getting ready. What will the day look like? What will the evenings look like? How can you take care of yourself? And for me, that's the most important piece, is working in self-care to every day, because it is very stressful. Even if it's just a subconscious level, seeing everyone in masks, there's this subconscious stress all of the time. And I think it's especially important. I've noticed even for myself as an adult, I need to unwind at the end of the day. I need to take better care of myself than in other years because of the sort of chronic nervousness, I think, that we feel in schools. Bruce?
Yeah, of course, totally agree. One of the things when we were discussing this earlier is just to make sure that we recognize that depending on the level of the students going back to school, this is going to be a very confronting time. If you think of the kids going into grade 1 or grade 2, they actually may have missed almost the entire year, if not a year and a half, of socialization. So then this next year is going to be a little scary for them. Also, the kids going into those bridging areas. So kids going from elementary to middle school, if you have a middle school, and those kids going into high school. Normally that sort of process is managed in the school year, and kids could have missed that. And that's something parents and educators need to be aware of, that the first days are going to be really confronting for those people who haven't had the chance, the regular socialization or getting used to the process.
So what are your thoughts? I mean, I think that's so important. And I think for kids right now, I mean, I have a son who's neurodivergent, and I know that he has not been socializing. He's going into grade 7. He's not going to a middle school, but I have an older son who's going into grade 9. It is a big transition, and they have missed quite a bit of school. What are some of the suggestions you can make for starting to prepare them now for being so that they can be on their put their best foot forward, I guess, on that first day, with respect to being prepared emotionally and being prepared just to enter school and be there and feel safe and feel comfortable?
Well, I think you sort of hit the nail on the head with what you said. Being prepared really helps with anxiety. So starting now with things like reminding them how to wear masks and practicing that if possible, finding masks that are comfortable, having them pick fabric if you're able to do that. I have a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles mask and a Care Bears mask. So you can find things like that. I also, comfort is really important. So I'm just going to show a couple of things that I found really comfortable. This is a flexible, I don't know what it's called, but you put it under the mask and it keeps it off of your face. And I didn't like the hard ones because I just found them really painful on the bridge of my nose. So this was really great for me personally. And then you can do things like with headbands where you sew buttons on, and that way the mask doesn't go around the ears, or baseball caps. And practicing wearing the masks when they're doing things that are fun. So it's not always associated with something terrible. So have them play Fortnite or whatever it is that they like to play, and have their mask on for 20 minutes or so. And I think preparing lunches together, if they're able to do that, and having them practice the whole process of lunch, because taking off the mask, putting it inside a bag so that the mask doesn't accumulate any other germs, and going through all of those things in a safe environment, with a slow pace, reminding them all of the things that we might not think to tell them about, if they have cutlery, where to put the cutlery so it's not touching the table. Just increasing some of those hygiene practices I think is really important.
And also ask them, talk to them, ask them what they're, if they have concerns, I was going to say fears, but let's say just say concerns. If they've got concerns, talk through the process. If they are worried about, what people are going to be thinking, like talk through that process. One of the recommendations we had, maybe for them later, but maybe it'll work here, is also practice going to school. If they're walking, walk with them. Make sure that they you do it for a couple of times, I should say, sorry, and make sure that they're aware of what happens when they're walking, and if they're catching buses or if you're going to be driving them. Just take them through so the journey itself feels safe and they're aware of what's going to go on.
I was going to, I definitely want to talk more about that. I was also going to go back to the mask thing and ask about, the sensory issues around masks and the rules around masks, because I feel like every school, every child is going to have to wear a mask. So practicing when they're doing their current activities sounds like a great idea. Practicing when they're outside, I imagine it's going to be warm in some of these rooms. So practicing that. But I also love the idea of trying to find masks that they like maybe a superhero that they like, or a material pattern that they like. I think that would make them much more inclined to wear them. And I think that's an excellent idea. I think that there are visual supports and stories that can be used. I know we are working on some of those at Autism Canada, and we can share those if people are interested in those. They will be on our website, I believe, but you can also email us for those. But I think that's something really important to start with, because clearly masks are not going away anytime soon. So let's make sure that they feel comfortable and that they can also express their personality a little bit with them, right? That's kind of fun. And then when we talk about the first days back, it sort of brings in that anxiety thing. And I know it's no matter who you are, those first few days are hard, right? Especially if you're going to a new grade, or you're going to a new school, or some of your friends are maybe online and not in class. So in terms of things that families can start now to prepare, I love the idea of let's have a lunch hour and let's make it at the right time every day so that they understand how long they have to, be in class for and then have their lunch, and they can sort of manage their appetite and understand what they need to eat to fuel themselves throughout the day as well, because that obviously can be tricky for kids. And then in terms of that trial run, so how do you do that? Do you start from the moment they wake up? Do you start setting an alarm now? What's your sort of thought process on how that goes?
Actually, Cara, if I may,
Yes, of course.
let me wear my parental hat just right now.
Great, thank you.
Just to fill everybody in, actually, we should have perhaps also said that I'm in Alberta, which is why it's a little maybe lighter than it is where you are. And so there's a recognition the system is different in different provinces. So if I say something, please don't think, what planet's he from? I'm from planet Alberta at the moment. So I have two kids, a 15-year-old and a 12-year-old. And we are starting, just by the way, today was the very first day back at school for what they call the alternative calendar system here in Calgary. So first day of school was today for some kids, which is kind of weird. Anyway, my wife and I talked earlier today, and we're just starting the process of shifting our kids' clocks. So during summer, they're little, they're teenagers. My son and daughter are normally falling asleep about between 10 and 10:30, maybe 11 at night. And we kind of let them wake up at any time. They both have to be up by 10 o'clock because they both have ADHD and need to have the medication before 10. So right now we're starting the process of, okay, Corbin, my 12-year-old, you need to be in bed by 10. And next week it's going to be 9:30. And the week after that, it's going to be 9, which is his normal bedtime. And we're going to start making the alarms. You can't stay up, you can't keep be in bed at 10 o'clock in the morning. We're going to maybe allow it to 9 o'clock. And then, so over the next couple of weeks, we're going to build that routine in it for them. So that's my suggestion would be start now. Start the idea that you're going from summer holidays into the school period. But don't try and get them up right now at 6:30 or 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock, whatever time, because that's a battle you're not going to win unless it's a natural process. So start that sort of thing. And I would suggest when you're getting to the week or two before school, start doing, if you can, dry runs at home. So in other words, try and get them up at about the time they would go, and then go through the breakfast procedure and whatever their morning routines are, and do that. And then either take them to school or say, we're just going to pretend we're at school now. And so get them used to that routine. And then if you know when their lunch breaks and recess breaks are, make sure that okay, it's now recess. And so you now have 15 minutes, and explain what happens. I think even if you've got a kid that went to school, normal school 2 years ago, those routines have probably been lost. And it's probably worth, don't think that no detail is small enough to forget. Like, go through everything. Cara, you need to take over now.
No, you did an amazing job. I don't know what to add, except the evening routine. As you are shifting the time gradually, try to build in some of those positive sleep hygiene things that you can do. So ending technology at least an hour before bedtime. I think pediatricians say 2 hours, but I know that's really hard to take devices away. It's even hard for me. But replacing that time with things that are calming for them, whether it's listening to a meditation or some sort of podcast. Some people exercise is good, but for some people it's not, because it can be very activating. But some sort of exercise, a hot bath, story time, those kinds of things make the transition to bedtime easier. And when you're not exposed to technology and the blue light from technology, your body's able to start producing melatonin, which helps people to get to sleep. So that would be part of the bedtime routine that's important to build in at this time as well.
Thank you, Kara, for that. And thank you, Bruce, as well. I think that's so important. And I think that starting now will give you a great base, and will also allow your child to be so comfortable and ready on that first day, right? So that they know their routine, so they know exactly what they're going to do. It'll be a little, they don't necessarily know what's going to happen once they hit the classroom, but at least the anxiety, you can quell the anxiety between the wake up and getting to school. And then hopefully the teacher will be there and will be ready to welcome them and ease their anxiety in the classroom. So that's great advice. Thank you so much. And that was one of my notes, was talking about adjusting. Go ahead, sorry.
I was just going to say, don't forget this routine is both for parents and students. So not only are we getting the students into the routine, we're also getting the parents in the routine of this is what needs to happen. And then you have to let them go to school. And that's it. Right. I think for parents, that's often not mentioned enough, that first day of school, you have to let them go. And that's scary.
That is scary. That can be very scary. And hopefully they have amazing teachers like the two of you, so that then when they come into the classroom, their parents and they will feel comfortable with that. So trial runs, great. Visualizing the trip was one of the points we made earlier, so even start with that now and talk through the trip before you even maybe start the trip, right? Talk about each step and how it's going to happen and how much sort of time there will be and some of that. Sleep and health hygiene, very important, and making sure they're eating breakfast. Breakfast to me is so important, and so many kids, especially older kids I know, want to sleep in and don't want to even bother with breakfast, but I think that's something really important to make sure that's part of the routine. What about this? We've talked a lot about self-care. What about talking about self-care for students, but also for the caregivers and also for the other kids in the family. How do we take care of ourselves, and how do these faces that I can see on the screen and names, how do they take care of themselves when they're managing this routine and getting their kids off to school? What are some ideas there?
I have a friend, Maya Tudal. She's an autistic psychologist in Denmark. And she actually came up with, she's writing a book on it right now, a system called energy accounting. And it's this framework for understanding that during our day, we want to make sure by the end of the day, we still have energy reserves. It's almost like a bank account. So there are things in your day that take away energy, and you can actually assign them a value like -10 every time, someone calls me and I don't recognize the number. That's a little bit stressful. And then you can also assign things to the positive. Taking a hot bath restores 40 points of energy. And you can actually chart it out for yourself. You can chart it out with your child. And it really is a good reminder that, especially on days when you are expending way more energy, you need to be devoting time to the other side of things, making sure you are building in the things that restore you, restore your energy. And sometimes that means saying no to things. So it's a system that for me helps me take care of myself. I've taught it to my students. And so they now have this understanding that it's not always about being productive. Productivity is great, but more important than being productive is having the energy, having positive mental health, being able to cope with everything going on around us. So that's something that I like to do. What about you, Bruce?
Well, I was going to say, one of the things, again, as we were preparing for this, we were talking about the students and self-care for the students, and then we self-care for the caregivers. But the one thing that I think was later on in our process was also making sure that other family members are included in this. And so, especially if you have a blended family, let's say you have neurotypical and neurodivergent kids at home, make sure that you are going to naturally concentrate on the neurodiverse kid, because they need to be making sure all their ducks in a row and the system is secure for them. But sometimes that means we also ignore the neurotypical kids. So just make sure that when you are working on something with a neurodivergent child, that you're also giving some special attention to the neurotypical child in a different way. Mm-hmm. Kara's, your friend's system also sounds like the spoon methodology, which I use quite often. One of these things is okay. Well, let me quickly talk about the spoon. The spoon analogy is it came from an article written by a woman with lupus, and she was trying to explain to her friend why she was tired all the time at a dinner, and the friend just couldn't understand. So the metaphor she came up with was spoons. So she gave her friend 10 spoons, and she said, now what happens, I want you to explain to me what you do in the morning, and that every activity takes a spoon. And so the person said, okay, well, I get out of bed. And so she went, okay, that's 1 spoon. And then I go and have breakfast. So do you walk down the stairs? Yep, that's another spoon. Okay, there's 2 spoons. And so, okay, I make breakfast. And do you know what you're going to have for breakfast? No, not 2. Okay, there's another spoon. And so the idea is you only have, neurodivergent people only have a limited number of spoons to get through the day. And each activity takes a spoon for us. And one of the managing mechanisms for neurodiverse people is to make sure that you don't use your spoons up. So if, and for instance, if I have to, let's say, for instance, I have to help my kids off to school and I have to teach classes in the afternoon, I need to make sure that that period before, when I'm parenting in the morning and when I'm teaching in the afternoon, that bit in the middle, I'm not trying to do too much, because if I do too much, I've used all my spoons and I'm useless. And I think, Kara, you talk about how much energy you have after you finish teaching.
Well, it depends. Over the last year, it was really difficult, because by the end of the day, I was just drained, and I'd come home and I'd have to go into the bedroom, draw the blinds, and just like have downtime before I engaged with anyone, because it took far more out of me, and I imagine it's the same for students as well. Just with all the new rules, the protocols, it was a draining year. So I'm preparing to go back to that. I'm preparing to engage in my own self-care routines and to talk even more with students about their own self-care. That's been a huge shift in my practice this past year.
I think that's a really important point as well, which for these parents is, you know, your kids are going to come home, and I'm sure most of you know this because your kids have been in school before, but you know, it's a little different when they're transitioning back to in class. They're going to come home and they're going to be tired at the end of the day, and they're going to be frustrated, probably easily frustrated when they're doing things at home. I know my son comes home sometimes, and you know, if he's frustrated from school, he certainly takes it out on me. So as parents, I think it's important that we take care of ourselves, but also provide the kids with some opportunities for some time and maybe some sensory tools and some things that they can use to manage. Now, is that something you guys would suggest that parents start working with their kids on now? Like maybe maybe when you get home from school at the end of the day, there's 30 minutes where everyone just has downtime and quiet time, if that's possible. I don't know, that's probably not possible for everyone, but any thoughts about that?
I think that's a fantastic idea, because often what happens is our students have expended so much cognitive energy, all of their resources throughout the day. They get home and maybe the routine is get right to homework. That's not going to work. They need the break. They need time. They might need a snack. 30 minutes, you know, if you have a sensory bin with sensory toys, and they're not toys, they're tools, sensory tools that they can engage with and take care of themselves before any other demands are placed on them, that will help restore some of that energy. And incidentally, if anyone needs ideas for sensory tools, I do have a blog post on my website with a whole list of things that are easy to find, and you as a family can experiment with different strategies and tools. People can decide what they like, what they don't like. Every person, whether they're neurodivergent or neurotypical, can benefit from having a wealth of strategies to draw on.
I was going to mention that as well, Kara. Thank you. I was going to say that I feel like that's important for everyone in the family, just to have that time. Because I mean, I think about when my workday ends sometimes, and I just need to settle for a few minutes as well. So I think we all need to, we all focus on our kids, I think, most of the time, but if you can take a few moments for yourself as well, I think, and make that part of your routine as a family for everyone,
and
that would
also,
be beneficial.
That also has the benefit of, it's not, you know, for the student, it's not, I need something different because I am different. It's no, everyone uses these tools. Everyone uses the tools that work for them. And it's important in this family for everyone to be able to talk about emotions, how they manage emotions, and to have what they need.
I was going to say similar sort of thing is to start normalizing this in all aspects of your life. The concept that there are just times where you've done too much and it's okay to take a break, and that everybody's aware that it's okay to take a break. I think that's a problem. It's certainly a problem when I'm teaching, because I teach at the high school level. I get to, my students are a little more maybe mature and self-aware, neurotypical and neurodiverse. But I find with the neurodiverse kids that they see society telling them that they need to be productive, as Kara said, all the time. And it's like, it's okay to take a break. You know, everybody does need this break, and this needs to be normalized at all levels.
Yeah, I just spent a whole summer telling beginning teachers, take a break, drop the readings, don't do it. And I'm their instructor, but we have to take care of ourselves.
One of the notes we had here to mention as well was one-on-one dates with parents. Do you want to elaborate on that?
So Bruce and I were chatting in advance, and I said that was one of the things that my parents did with me and my siblings. I think part of it was so that we didn't feel like my younger brother, who was autistic, that he got all of the attention. I never felt that way, but my parents built in time to do things with us individually. So whether it was watching a show with my mom or a movie, my dad would sometimes take me out to see theater shows so that we would go on little dates together, which was really nice. or going for a walk, whatever it was, making the most of one-on-one time and developing the relationship between child and parent for all the children in the family to have that time with their parent.
Great,
That
thank you.
reinforces the thing I said before about, especially in blended families, that's super important.
Right, yeah, okay, thank you. Now, does anyone have any questions up until this point? And if you do, you can maybe put a little note in the chat, or I can unmute you, because the next thing we're going to get into is routines and homework. And I think that as we move out of this section into that section, there may be more questions regarding routines and homework and how families manage that. So if anybody has any questions at this point, maybe throw them in the chat, or you can, I think you can put your hand up and I can see that. No? We can move on. Do you, Kara and Bruce, have anything else you want to discuss before we get into?
Yes.
Okay.
I thought of two other things. So laying out clothes the night before, packing as much of the backpack the night before. Those are really great things to do as well. Just saving time in the morning. Anything you can do beforehand so the morning is less stressful, the better.
Great. I saw someone, I saw something on Instagram or Facebook the other day, I think, where someone had purchased those storage bins and there was 5 drawers. And so on Sunday, they would fill the drawers so that every day they didn't have, the clothes would be in each drawer so that it was done for the week and they didn't have to worry about that at all. And I thought that was kind of genius.
I love that. I need to get that for myself.
Yeah, right? I know. Okay, so let's, one of the things actually that we didn't mention, oh, sorry, Gail has a question. Let me just find Gail here. Where are you, Gail? Can you unmute yourself? Yes. Would you like to ask your question?
I unmuted my mic.
Thank you.
Well, not a question, but a statement based on that storage bin idea is also color coding or just going by days of the week, certain things to be doing to help keep everybody organized.
Great idea.
So
Yep.
Yeah. So that was not a question, but a statement built on that storage bin idea. I think it's awesome. And that can be used in so many different ways, like the ways that I just mentioned now. Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Katrina, did you have a question? No?
Hi,
Okay.
sorry.
Oh, hi.
Because Kara's telling something about the sensory tools
Yep.
on her website. I'm just wondering if
Oh, we'll
you
share
would
her
be able to
website
share.
information.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yep. Yeah, we will do that for sure at the end. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, no problem. So doesn't look like anybody else has a question. So why don't we move on to talking about one of the things actually that I wanted to mention that we had slotted sort of in the beginning of the session that we didn't mention was that parents, of course, have the right to request COVID protocols if you're unsure about the policies in the classroom. That was one of the notes we made, so that if you are unsure about what's happening in the classroom, don't be afraid to ask about those things. The teacher or the principal should be very able to provide you with that information. They should be able to do that before school even starts, I would think.
Well, we'll see, because policies keep changing.
That's true. It's a good point. Yeah, it is a good point. They do keep changing. What, Kara, in your opinion, and Bruce as well, I want both of your opinions. Are parents able to reach out to new teachers that are going to be new for their children in advance of the school year? I have not had good experience with that, but I guess that depends on the board and the school.
And you might not know, you might not know the teacher right away, especially years like this where we're figuring out class sizes, budgets. The information from the ministry is a lot later this year.
Okay.
So you might not know the teacher until the first day or the day before. But I think it would definitely be appropriate in the first week of school, certainly, to reach out with an email or send a note and say, I'd love to connect at some point and talk with you about my child or with my child. Please let me know. I think that's absolutely fine to make contact. Most teachers would be very happy to have some like a heads up of things like things that are stressful for the student that teachers can do their best to mitigate, and strategies that were working in previous years. I think that's absolutely fine to share.
Great, thank you. And Lori,
Actually,
sorry, go ahead, Bruce. Yeah. No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I actually have an interview. I'm going to talk to a friend of mine who's a principal, just taking over her first school. And she is putting the classrooms together right now at her middle school. And it would be no good. There's no parents, sorry, teachers aren't assigned to classes yet in her school. But what I was going to say is, I think it's completely appropriate. And for Alberta, it's probably the same thing for the rest of the country as well. Admin is starting to go back to schools like this week. And so if you can find a principal's email address, or we call them learning support teachers here. Is that the same thing in Ontario? Do you have learning support teachers?
Different boards have different things.
Okay. So perhaps a general email to a principal saying, look, I have a neurodivergent child who's going to your school for the first time or going back for after a couple of years. I would love to have a talk to whoever is appropriate to help manage the thing. I think principals right now, vice principals, if that's the case, are completely open to this sort of communication, because they honestly can be a little bored at this time of year. And so, and just it's just a simple request and answer, a question. They'll be able to fill in that in for you when it's appropriate, when it can happen.
There's a couple of notes here, just in the comments from Lori, the first one that says she's always been able to take her kids into school before school starts, which I think it also is really important when we're talking about that routine. You know, you want to actually maybe even get them in the door, show them where their classroom is if you can, let them see what it looks like. That's fantastic, Lori, that you can do that. And Karen, I see your note here that yeah, because of COVID, you weren't able to do that. Yeah, it's tricky for sure. So maybe it would be helpful for you to email the principal and try and get into school beforehand. Oh, a Zoom meeting, that's great. That helps too, for sure, Lori, that's great. And Elaine, I think that's how you pronounce it. I'm sorry if I did that wrong. Elaine said that her daughter's starting a new school and she wants to have a visit, but the office doesn't open until August 30th. Yeah, so you have a couple of weeks. I mean, we're in the Toronto District School Board here, and I think they start on the 9th. So hopefully you'll get an opportunity to get in. I know there's a couple of professional development days before school starts, which hopefully means that school will be open and you could potentially get your kids in, depending on what board you're with. So so hopefully you can all do that. Hopefully an email to the principal will help with that. I would trust that most principals would be open to allowing that. Okay, let's talk a bit about routines and homework, because I think as parents with neurodivergent kids, homework is a challenge. I know at my house it is, and I know, speaking to friends and colleagues, you know, homework's not one of our favorite things as parents. So let's talk a little bit about what these fantastic parents here with us can do to help their child, to support their child, to maybe how they can work with them to make that experience maybe a little easier, a little less stressful, a little less of a struggle.
Neither Bruce nor I are fans of homework, but we understand it's a reality. So we will give you some strategies that work. I think definitely having the break when a bit of downtime, and not something that's super engaging. You don't want to start with their favorite video game, or, as you know, it can be very difficult to transition to something less preferable after that. I use a strategy I like to call the chunk and check-in. And it's a way of reviewing what they have. So have your child pick a subject, review what they have to do, have them tell you what the steps are, and give them a small chunk to do. And then make sure they know what to do, leave them alone. Like you want to be building their ability to do things on their own. So walk away and then come back and check in, and then review and give the next component. And you can do this with projects as well. You can break things down together and assign dates to the things so that they know how to manage projects over time. I have a video about it. Again, I keep like pitching my website, but I have a video about it. And it's a really
Tell them the
helpful
address.
strategy.
Tell them the address.
It's my name, caradymond.com. And I also think it's important to have a cutoff time to not
put
do
it in the
homework
chat.
after. Don't do homework after a certain time. We don't want to be exhausting students. They've been using all their cognitive resources the entire day. And, we need to be also teaching life work balance to children. So whatever the time is, they get as much homework done as they can until that time with breaks built in. And if you have to, send a note or a message to the teacher and just say, we worked really hard and this is what we got done. Sorry, can't do more. Bruce?
It's amazing how often you send an email to a teacher and say, we only got that much done, and the teacher doesn't care. I mean, in a good way. That's not a bad thing to sort of say, look, we tried, and this is ability. It's funny when we say routine and homework, one can never generalize about any autistic trait, but I think one can almost generalize that we all need routine. We all need like solid routines. And so the thing with the preparation for school is it's maybe restarting a routine that the student had previously, or it may be a new routine. And those routines need to be exactly as Kara said, using the chunk and check-in method for your homework also works for routine. So think about getting up in the morning, like what's the goal? What are the steps to do that? And how what's the procedure, which order they should come in, but also coming home. It should be part of the routine to say, don't come home and go straight to work. My daughter, bless her heart, she hit high school and she's just blossoming, and she wants to come home and start working straight away. And it's like, no, sweetie, you need to have a break. So we've almost set up a routine that she's not allowed to do anything when she comes home, no matter what she wants. With my son, it's a little harder. And so the routine is, okay, you can do what you're going to be doing, until 4:30. And then we start to talk about, do you have any work you need to complete that wasn't at work from school? And we need to finish that, and getting ready for dinner and things like that. That's this idea of routine is super important to give autistic people an idea of control, that they have control of what's going on in the world.
I think
Okay.
that's, sorry, did you have more?
No.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say, I think that's so important is I think that's where a lot of kids on the spectrum, and I'm speaking from experience with my own child, when he doesn't feel like he's in control and he doesn't know what's happening next, that's when we start to struggle. And so, yeah, creating that routine at the beginning. But I think there's so much value in that comment about just reaching out to the teacher and just saying, we did this, that's all we got. And, that's going to have to be enough, because the other thing is, you don't want it to be a battle. And I feel like often it can become a battle, and then it becomes emotional, and then it's so hard. And then everyone, gets frustrated, and that's not worth it. It's just not worth it.
And school can be traumatic enough as it is for autistic students. So you want them to really enjoy being at home. You want them to have that chance to restore. And I will even go so far as to say, I had a student who was registered online, so virtual school, for the past year. And she was stressed because there was no boundary between school and home because she was at home. And she felt like she wasn't doing anything right. She felt like everything was compounding. All the assignments were piling up and it was hard to manage. And I spoke with her mom and I said, why don't you give her Wednesdays off? Just like call her in sick. Have that be a self-care day. And don't have expectations to do work. I can talk with the teacher and make sure that we're accommodating and reducing any catch-up that has to be done. And it was the best strategy. Suddenly, everything else worked. She had that chance to restore. She was able to catch up with work. She felt good about herself. She just needed that break. And so
And maybe,
this is,
sorry, I was just going to say, maybe for some people, it's not taking a day off, because that's not always easy, but maybe it's, we're not going to do homework,
Mhm,
or we're not going to do
exactly.
homework 2 nights a week. You know, maybe it's something like that, because it's so important that we manage that emotional overload as well, and for ourselves and for our kids.
I mean, as parents, we have to think about what we want our kids to, what are we trying to teach our kids? And as teachers, we actually think the same way. What do we want to teach the kids? Most teachers don't want to produce children who can tell you the correct dates in order. That's, we want to teach and create and help create people in whatever way they want. And this is the point where your routine as a family, their routine as an autistic student, it's up to you to make that. And that's what's important, not allowing anybody externally to say this must happen. Now, there's going to be consequences, perhaps, but that's a juggle. Is it more important that a procedure that you think is not going to be helpful for your child in the long run, are they going to have a negative consequence at school? That may be, but the positive is that they're going to be happier. My son did not enjoy online at all. Unfortunately, his teacher was not prepared for online. And this is not a criticism of the teacher. This is part of the problem we've had in the last couple of years, is that teachers have just been said, suddenly there's a switch. Okay, you're now online now. Everything you do has to be online. It's not that easy. And unfortunately, Corbin had a lot of what we just call busy work. He'd have 5 days and it's like, you need to watch the film for this, you need to do this. And it's like, it was so pointless for him. And so we just said, do what you want. I mean, it was a 5-step thing, do 3 steps. And if you don't want to go any further, that is okay.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And you sort of took the words right out of my mouth, Bruce, because one of the points we were also talking about was, you know, what do we value at the end of the day, and what do we want them to learn, and what do we want them to take away? You know, I want my kids to be able to do laundry and cook me dinner, frankly. So those are some of the things that I want them to learn, you know. So maybe a couple nights of not doing homework means that they can learn some of those skills that they're going to, and, you know, it's not about me, but that they're going to learn some of those skills that they're going to need down the road, because hopefully they won't be living with me forever. They might be, but, you know, one of them may be, one of them may not be, but I want them to learn some of those things as well. So I think also understanding that balance between that learning and sort of practical skills is really important. And we want to make sure we have time for all of them. So, and we want to make it enjoyable. We don't want it to be a pressure to get the homework done, get the laundry done, you know, all of those things. It just is, it's really a lot. It's a lot for our kids, especially after a long day at school, because it can be very exhausting and draining. So, so that, any other tips for homework at this point? Any other ideas about homework? Go ahead.
No, sorry, did you have to finish? Did you
No,
want to finish your thought? No.
I was just going to say, I recommend Kara's book because there's so many points in it. And here I am flogging your book, but it truly is a great book for that kind of thing, for sure. But any other ideas from you guys? And then we can maybe open it up to a few questions, because it is almost 9. And so I want to make sure we have a little bit of time for questions and talking about what we're going to talk about next week as well.
So actually, I have very practical stuff, which I'm going to say these things in my own words, and quite honestly, Kara does say them in the book as well. One of the things with the preparation for going back to school, and again, it doesn't matter if this is the very first time or if it's the 12th time they've gone back to school, allowing the students, giving themselves self-advocacy, building up their resilience to ask questions in the classroom about what is required. One of the biggest problems I have with my kids is that they're often given a homework assignment and it's unclear. Now, I teach, I know that sometimes you say something off the cuff. one of the things we need to encourage for autistic students is to make sure they're aware of exactly what is required. And that starts a dialogue. The best thing would be the students having the dialogue with the teacher, because that's the environment we kind of want in the end. But I recognize that's probably parents need to talk to the teachers. So for my son, we required last year that he had a specific homework book, a separate. The school didn't require a homework book. We asked a homework book, and the teacher would write, or teacher would request Corbin to write down exactly what he needed for homework. Corbin took the book to his teacher, who then signed it off and said, yes, this is what you want. So he would come home and we knew exactly what he needed to do. And the system broke down sometimes because sometimes he forgot, sometimes the teacher forgot, sometimes a substitute teacher. Again, that's okay, as long as you have the general structure. And because what we want is by the time when the kids are in grade 10, 11, and 12, that they've got enough resilience to know that's what they need to do for homework. If they've given homework, they need to talk to the teacher, and they need to make sure before they leave the classroom what is required.
Mhm. For our next session, I will have a self-advocacy document that is easy to fill out, that students can give to their teachers, or parents can fill it out with their child for younger students. And that's a good way to start the conversation in September as well.
Karen's just made a great point in the comments here, and I'm just going to summarize it. But basically, her son looks like he's in grade 7, so that's a tough age. Puberty, all of those things are happening. You're starting to be aware of what your peers think of you. She said that she had an OT that her son worked with his OT to plan ways to support him. And so she suggested that maybe if you have access to an occupational therapist, they may also have suggestions on managing back to school and transitions, and creating a plan for movement breaks and snack breaks that could hopefully work with the teacher. And I know a lot of school boards have OTs available. They're sometimes hard to access because there's usually a long waiting list, but if you have access to that via your benefits or something, maybe worth looking into before the school year starts. Kara's book is available on her website, Lori, and I think, right, Kara, it's available on your website? Yep.
Yeah, it'll direct you to all the appropriate links.
Yeah. Okay, so let's just see if anybody has any questions around homework, around routine. You're right in there now, Lori. Any of those other things before we start to wrap up. Again, we're going to meet again in 2 weeks and talk more about the advocacy things that Bruce and Kara were just talking about accommodations, how to ask for accommodations, and then some strategies for managing overwhelm after school. And we're going to start a little discussion about IEPs, but again, we're going to do a separate IEP session because that is its own beast, and we want to make sure we cover that really well. So we're going to do a session in September all about IEPs. But if anybody has any questions now about homework, about any of the things we've talked about the starting the routine now, shifting clocks for kids, making sure you're acknowledging everyone in the family, any sensory ideas, any of those things, feel free to raise your hand and you can ask these amazing experts.
Actually, Julie, as people are thinking about that, I also just want to clarify that Cara and I, when we were planning this, the first week was about the period before going back to school. And we try to concentrate on those things, because what happens in our next session, we'll be talking about what happens after they've been at school. And it's a different process. You've got a whole bunch of things to go before we go, and so we're expecting. We've been giving you a whole bunch of different ideas, and we're expecting lots of questions next in 2 weeks.
There will be lots to talk about, but yes, we will have lots of time for questions next time as well. Nobody has any questions right now? I'm so glad that everyone was able to join us. I hope that you got some tips. Again, Kara's website is a great resource. The Autism Canada website is also a great resource. We have a family support team that is available to help you anytime. You can call, you can email info@autismcanada.org. If you have questions about any of this stuff, there's always someone there to answer your question. Bruce is available. We can send him questions if you have questions for Bruce. I'm just really grateful to Bruce and Kara for being here and for talking through some of these things, because they really are excellent at what they do, and they really do know these kids, and they really do know some of the strategies for helping all of us manage the back to school thing. I'm going to plug for a second our Awesome Conference, which is coming up in October. That's on October 23rd. It's a day of presentations by individuals on the spectrum. We've got some great people, including Bruce, presenting this year. So if you're available to join us for that day, I highly recommend it. It is really a fantastic event. We have a few other things coming up for Autism Awareness Month, which in Canada is October, so keep your eyes open. And we will be back here in 2 weeks to talk about the second part of this session. We will also hopefully have some of our Autism Canada resources available for you, social stories, visual supports, those kinds of things. So if you're looking for that early, let us know, give us a call. And other than that, I think that's going to wrap it up for tonight. So thank you very much for being here. And if you have any questions post this event, you could email them or save them for the 31st.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much. Good night.